Going. All right, so welcome J-Teen and friends to this very exciting webinar. We are featuring Sara Allen, Director of the Jewish Teen Funders Collaborative. I had to make sure to get all the words right. And she's going to share with us today her work with the 10 co-funded Jim Joseph cities, share with us the findings. They do evaluations in addition to the work that they're doing on a regular basis in order to inform the field, and hopefully that will begin to trickle out from those cities into all of the other communities that many of us are serving as well. So I don't want to take anything away from what she's going to say, so I will stop talking and welcome Sara Allen.
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. I have a lot of information. I don't have to get to all of it. I sort of want to focus on the areas that you guys find most interesting. So please feel free to call my attention to anything you guys want to go deeper into. So I'm Sara. I have been the director of the Jewish Teen Education and Engagement Funder Collaborative for about 3 years, I think. And it has been sort of in some formation since 2013. I'll take you a little bit through the history, what we're learning, and then where we're going. So here we go. So what is this Funder Collaborative, and why do we have so many names? So I typically like to shy away from things like innovative. It's, overused words. I will say this though, I use it. It's very important here because there's not another model like this in the Jewish community. It's actually been quite groundbreaking in the idea that there are 10 communities across the country that are co-funded with one national funder, the Jim Joseph Foundation. And the idea is really, how can we seed community-based programs, 10 cities across the country? How can they be locally relevant? There was a very intensive planning process in each of the 10 communities. And how do we network these 10 communities so that we can advance the learning, accelerate their growth, and really share it out to the broader community? So there are 10 cities that are engaged in this work. We come together virtually every month, and we also come together in person 2 to 3 times a year in various formations. We learn, we share where things are going well. We're super transparent about sticking points that we might be hitting. And it's sort of my job to share findings with the field, because the hope is that all of this really does go far beyond just the 10 cities that are engaged in this work. One note about funding too, each of the 10 cities share a one-to-one match with Jim Joseph Foundation, and then they are funded in different ways in each of the 10 cities. They're also set up differently. So I will sort of halfway through talk about some of the through lines that we're seeing, but just know that this was really designed to be community specific and sensitive to local needs. So some have local foundation partners, some are working with federations. It's really across the board. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is, everybody sort of, I'm sure, has gone deep into what do we mean by teens and Gen Z? What are some of their key drivers? What are the things that we know influence them and the ecosystem with which they live? Nothing in here will be a surprise to you. It's just really important to note that in the planning process, each community has spent a ton of time really trying to understand who are teens today. They did this. So it started in 2013. Jim Joseph Foundation very much wanted to make an impact in the teen space. It was very much a priority for them, and they wanted to understand how they could do this in a community-specific way. What they did was bring together representatives from different communities for conversations and discussions. They did a lot of learning around who teens are today. They commissioned a series of research. The first was effective strategies in teen engagement. All of this lives on our website, and I'm happy to send notes afterwards, where they really tried to understand what might already be working and how you could build and grow from that. This was also the precursor to the original Gen Z report, which really helps people understand what Generation Now is. That was run through the Jewish Education Project. You guys probably have already done some learning around that. So that was a piece of social science research. And from all of that work, really what became foundational to the work of the 10 communities are these questions. You might also know them as the 14 outcomes. And through the work with the Jewish Education Project and a variety of national funders, the idea was to really create a set of outcomes that we believe are central to the thriving work of teens today. What are the positive outcomes for teens and tweens? I like to categorize them as opposed to the 14 individual statements, which are below, really along these 4 questions. Who am I? To whom and what am I connected? To whom and for what am I responsible in this world? And how can I make a difference in this world? I think all of us sitting here today would probably agree that these are eternal questions and they're not limited to teens. And really what we've been able to do is create this specific outcomes for teens. And this is what we hope participation in any of the initiatives and the teen programs would lead to. So this has really been a foundational piece since the beginning of the development of the Funder Collaborative. So what does it mean to be a funder collaborative? Obviously, we do share the same national funder, but we also realized early on that it's important to be united by what we call our shared frameworks. So there are 6 measures of success. These are our driving forces. This is what we hold ourselves accountable to. And this is really unites the different ways we go about doing our work. So we are all committed across the 10 communities to increasing the number of Jewish teens who are meaningfully involved in Jewish life in ways that are meaningful to them. We want to significantly increase the diversity of the teens. Each of the communities are really tasked with defining this for themselves. Some communities are really talking about socioeconomic diversity. Some are talking about ethnic diversity. Some are talking about geographic diversity. Some are talking about working more with LGBTQ and children of interfaith families, because there's a lot of ways to define diversity, and I think actually would be an interesting webinar in the future. And so it's not just that we wanted to involve these teens, we really wanted to have an impact on their Jewish selves. So this goes back to the outcomes, the teen Jewish engagement learning scales, which are the TJLs or the teen survey. You guys might have heard some of those words before. And that is a survey that all of the communities participate in. It is also the same survey that was used for the Gen Z Now report. If you've done some learning around this recent report, it's the same survey. And that's really kind of understanding the impact on the teens as whole beings. We wanted to make sure that we were creating financially sustainable models. We wanted to raise teens as a communal priority. We wanted to make sure that people were really valuing the investments that we're making in teens. The last one is a typo, sorry about that. The last one is youth professionals, which is part of why I'm happy to share everything that we're learning. It became clear as the community started progressing along the work that just couldn't achieve our outcomes without investing significantly in professional development for all of the educators and youth workers, really loosely defined. Anybody who works and comes in contact with teens, we really wanted to increase their capabilities and capacity and understanding of what it means to work with teens today. So this is our unifying shared frameworks. And then you talked a little bit about the measurement tools. So it's one thing to say these are sort of what we want to hold ourselves accountable to. It's another to figure out how to measure that and what that means. So for teens, for the first three measures of success, we have the teen survey. We also really wanted to talk about parents and understand how they're influencing teens. We have a survey for them. We have a youth professionals survey, and we have a sustainability diagnostic tool, which really sort of helps communities understand if the changes they're starting to lay the groundwork for in their community could be sustained in the future. So each of the 10 communities have a local evaluation budget. They are fielding these surveys locally. It all rolls up to a cross-community evaluation, which I oversee, and some of the findings that I'm going to share today. And then we also document the work that we're doing in a case study. There have been 2 to date. They're really worthwhile reads, and again, live on our website if people are interested, sort of talking about the development of the initiatives. And this last one that we're currently working on is sort of about the influence and impact what we're learning is having on the field in general. I'm going to pause for questions because I really know I'm going fast, or I can keep going.
Sara, can I sneak a quick question in? And I saw David Breifman's on here, so if he wants to weigh in on this, I know the question's been asked of him as well, or he's addressed it as well, and that is, many of us have been working in the field of Jewish education. And as J-Teen rebranded and reestablished itself earlier this year, we expanded our mission and included the world of teen engagement. Is it possible for you to just kind of put some clarifiers on the differences that you see between teen education and teen engagement work? And don't kill me for asking the question.
No. I mean, I'm only going to answer in the context of the Funder Collaborative. I'm happy to sort of let David talk about what he sees in the field in general or the educational space. In the Funder Collaborative world and the initiatives that were created, there's very much been a desire to make sure that the engagement opportunities that we're creating involve a level of education. We do a lot of research and study around how important the Jewish content really is to all of the outcomes and all of the teams that all of the measurement and the outcomes that we want to see across all of those 4 questions. So for us specifically, we are only interested in the education, the engagement opportunities, and creating new ones that include deep and rich education. David, do you want to add to that?
Maybe he stepped away.
Okay, maybe at a future date. I'm just going to run through quickly just to give you guys a sense when we talk about these initiatives, what do we really mean by an initiative, and some of the stuff that the communities are piloting across the 10. There's a ton more details of each of the communities on our sites and linked to their own initiatives. So we use the word initiative, which is broad because really we're trying to do a lot of things. It's not just the programmatic element. There is a level of professional development across all of the 10 communities. There's really helping to make sure that teen voices are heard in across all organizations. And so we're trying and piloting and experimenting with a variety of different things, including new programmatic offerings. I'm not going to go one by one, and I'm happy to send this afterwards if it's helpful, but I think it's worth calling out a few. First, you'll notice that under each of the communities, Atlanta says Jumpspark, and Baltimore says Forefront, and Chicago says Springboard. A lot of the communities, I think all but one, participated in a really significant branding effort, and the desire was to create some excitement around a new independent way of engaging teens that are really sort of teen-focused and teen-centric. And Dina, if you're on here, I think Dina from Baltimore Forefront might be on the call, and she can speak a little bit to how they involved teens in that process and why it was important to them as a community. Dina?
Hi, yeah.
Hi. Oh, great, you are on.
Sure. So we worked with a firm on our branding, and we're really clear from the beginning that whatever we came up with had to resonate, land, and ideally be inspired by teens themselves. So they were actually involved at every level. They were at every table that professionals and other stakeholders were sitting at when it came to the branding. It was really a priority for us that this resonate with them. It generated some interesting conversation, everything from when they looked at the pictures of teens that were being used, which at the time were stock photos, and, teens would raise the question, I don't see anyone there that looks like me because I'm a Jew of color or I'm an LGBTQ teen. We really took that to heart. The name itself, they were adamant that it not have the word Jewish in the name. So we swung very far the other direction, and we sort of stripped all the, we stripped the name completely of anything having to do with Judaism, and then they pushed back and said, but you have to have a Jewish star, otherwise how are we going to know it's for us? So we really involved them from the get-go, and we're pleased at how they influenced the process. So our name actually, between the 4 and the F, it does have a little Magen David up there, which they were insistent on. So we let them kind of lead the way.
Awesome. And don't go far, because I'm going to call on you for more color on the next piece too. One of so you'll notice a few things that are popping up that are similar in a few of them. One is the convening role that a lot of the initiatives are really playing in bringing together anybody working in the teen space locally. There's a few fellowships that you'll see across. What's also really important to note is that many of them are creating their own community-specific websites, really bringing that branding to the next level and helping teens in the discovery process, and parents as well, about all of the opportunities that are happening across the community. Because again, these are community-based initiatives. They're not sort of promoting one specific program. One of the key ways that they're really trying to break down a lot of the silos to make sure that this happens is the investment in professional development. And while there's a lot of really significant learning and professional development that's being offered across the communities, there's also really low cost, low resource ways that this is really making a difference. We've started, and now it's spread to about 4 or 5 communities, co-location and co-working days for youth professionals. So anybody who's working in the teen space, really sort of self-defined, coming together once a month. Some people are doing it in their homes, some people are doing it in actual co-working spaces to really build community amongst the teen professionals locally. Baltimore sort of has the extreme version of this with co-locating them professionally, which, I just love to talk about some of the positive benefits you see of moving, to steal your language, from the shift from the my teen, I'm in England, you know what I'm saying? Our teens.
Sure. I'll just say briefly that when we have teen professionals gathering in our space, we've actually banned the phrase "my teens." It is not allowed to be uttered here at Forefront's headquarters. We just feel that insisting on that language actually allowed us to sort of initiate a culture shift around the teen landscape and inspired people to be a little bit more collaborative in their approach. And we have noticed that change happened maybe a little bit more easily or seamlessly had we not been so insistent on the language. Thoughts become words and words become actions, or whatever that famous quote is. But it really has made a difference in helping people understand that we're all in this together. If we know that the majority of teens are not engaging, what's the point in being territorial over the ones who are? We could be working together to find those other folks. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sarah,
so there's a lot. Mm-hmm.
Oops, sorry. Quick question on the line. Somebody asked if any of these co-locations include non-Jewish teen professionals. So is there any kind of cross working with Jewish and non-Jewish?
Such an interesting question. In the co-working days, no, not yet. Although I will, sorry, Dina, you're sort of the woman of the hour now. But I will say one of the things that Baltimore does that's really interesting is when they bring some folks together. One of the first meetings that I went to 3 years ago that offered professional development for teen professionals, there were folks who worked with teens. I think I'm remembering from like the local library even, who were not in the Jewish space. Do you know, is that still a piece of it?
Yeah. Wow, that was good memory, Sarah. Impressive. But yeah, we do, if we know youth professionals who either are in a space that has significant touch on Jewish teens, or we have opportunities where we're engaging in some learning that is not necessarily Judaically motivated, but is more on the adolescent development side of things, or there's something relevant to share there. We do have those relationships, and we do try to include those individuals. We have some people for the Baltimore Public Libraries where there are certain branches where there is significant participation from Jewish teens. There's an arts organization here in town that has a similar experience, and I guess this is poignant for today, but we have a partner with the Elijah Cummings Youth Program, which is very, very important to this city and fosters a love of Israel amongst non-Jewish teens. It's a fascinating program, and they're housed in a Jewish agency, and we do a lot of work with them. So folks like that, we would certainly invite to be part of this initiative.
And at the end, I'm going to start talking a little bit more about our wellness work, that we're moving more into it, and that for sure is involving secular organizations. Nothing that we're seeing in the Jewish community we're not seeing outside of the Jewish community, and there's a lot to learn from both sides. So another piece I just kind of want to call out is you'll see Upstart's name a few times. They work with 4 of our communities. A key piece of this is to really seed new ideas that are happening. So in a few communities, they run an accelerator program, working with existing organizations who might not be involved in the teen space to try and move them more into creating new teen-focused programs. Also trying to work with organizations who might be deeply invested already in the teen space, just sort of take the learnings from what we're seeing and create new programs. And then the other piece of the work that we're doing is a lot of capacity building for the local communities. One piece of it, and just because I think New York still might be on the phone that it's worth calling out to, is in New York, they were specifically focused on summer experiencing, creating and incubating new summer experiences, and then creating this amazing searchable database called Find Your Summer, which really houses just countless summer experiences. And the new experiences that they've incubated, including a Sababa Serp camp, is also spreading to a few different communities. They've really done a lot of work around the searchable database. So New York, if you're on the phone and you want to chime in, feel free. Great. So the other thing that's important to note is that the initiatives really have all launched on staggered timeframes. So everybody's sort of in different phases of launching or renewing their initiatives. But one of the things that the Funder Collaborative is deeply invested in is really trying to support the sustainability of these initiatives and the change that's being created. Everything from the language that Dina talked about, which is just a really important piece of ecosystem level change, all the way up to our teams being, invited in meaningful ways to serve on advisory boards, our donors really understanding the importance of thinking about teens. Our next phase is really trying to understand what has been working locally and then try to get that out far beyond the 10 communities. So we're really spending a lot of time thinking about how we scale some of the promising models. I'll talk about a few of them in a minute. And at the same time, also our measurement tools. We have developed these phenomenal ways to really sort of understand what's happening for teens, parents, and youth professionals, and we'd love to see everybody using those. We're also really trying to understand what's bubbling up in a few of the communities and how we might better respond. So we spoke a little bit about professional development, and then for sure the wellness space that Betsy, get ready. So key trends that we're seeing across all 10 of the communities is for sure the empowerment matters. It's not about programming for teens, right? Everybody on the phone, I'm sure, has heard, don't do anything about me without about me without me. And sort of how do we involve teens in significant ways. This goes far beyond sort of just asking their opinion. I'm sure Dina will share a ton of insight around Heart's Ladder at some future call, really making sure that the contributions are meaningful, that they feel heard, and that they're implemented. And then also really designing from the ground up with the teens. 4 of our communities have launched micro grants where really teens are able to tap in anywhere from $500 to $5,000 to create programs that they want to go and invite their friends to. So really putting them in the driver's seat has been critical. I talked about discovery. We'll get to this in a later slide too. Many people, most people don't really even know the full spectrum of what's out there. So that is definitely a piece of why we're building and investing in the websites, but also why it's important that organizations are working together to share the full spectrum of what's out there. We don't live in a world anymore where one teen identifies only with one organization. They really like the idea of exploring, and that's been a real culture shift. We talk about the ecosystem. Teens don't live in a vacuum. They have parents. They are touched by youth professionals. Teens don't wake up one day and are 14 years old. They were middle schoolers before this. And when this whole endeavor started, we were looking specifically and only in the high school years. And really this whole network has built out of starting to work more in the middle school, really understanding how connected they are to the outcomes that we want to see moving forward through the high school years, and also parents. You know, there's the wellness angle of it for sure. Parents are really seeking to better understand how to parent adolescent teens. So we're doing a lot of work around parent workshops and conferences around building resiliency. But also, we like to pretend that parents aren't key decision makers for teens, but for the early teen years, they still are. And it's really important that we engage with them. And when I get to the youth professionals survey a little bit later, we also need to better equip our youth professionals to engage with parents. Many of them report that they don't feel comfortable having conversations with parents. And that's an important skill that we want to offer. Educators, I spoke a lot about how, you know, this work really hinges on the work that you all are doing. And then the last piece is wellness. Only 1 out of the 10 communities starting from 2014 had a focus on teen wellness, and I would say that now all of us are talking about it. So here, I spoke a little bit about the ecosystem, and I can get into a little bit of our findings. This is our cross-community data for the past 3-ish years. We fielded 5,000 surveys. We have information from 700 youth professionals, and we're currently in the process of collecting this year's data and analyzing it. Almost 4,000 teens and almost 800 parents. So it's not just surveys. We've also done a lot of interviews and focus groups across all of the 10 communities. And I'm not really going to get into the teen stuff. For the most part, if you've done the reading around the Gen Z Now report, most of the key findings are echoed in there, because I wanted to get to the youth professionals. We now have a good sense of who it is who serves teens, probably who it is who are on the call. I'm sorry, it's dark and hard to read. 91% identify as Jewish. 62% attended 7 years or more of supplementary school. So here's what's also really interesting. We were really tasked with increasing the diversity of teens who are involved. And what we're finding is often the youth professionals don't reflect the population of this new diverse category of teens that we're hoping to reach. And that could potentially be a challenge. 36% had participated in 7 years or more of Jewish summer camp. Excellent recruiting ground. And 7 years or more of Jewish day school. So when we think about how are we involving and engaging children of interfaith families who often don't attend Jewish day schools, there's something here about our youth professionals and increasing the diversity of our youth professionals. As Dina mentioned, really wanting to make sure that teens see themselves reflected And also just really so that they have an understanding of the world in which the teens that they're working with are growing up in. I spoke a little bit about the value of the collaboration and networking. Again, these results and how important it is to network youth professionals, so yay, Erica, is just hugely, hugely important. And this is really coming from no-cost co-working days. So there's ways to do this in your local community that don't require significant investment. We don't have a longitudinal study, but have every reason to believe that this can also help with retention and job satisfaction. So one of the things that we really wanted to understand is why youth professionals got into the work that they're doing and what they hope what are their hopes for teens. And super interesting by a large margin. The first one is really about life skills and nothing to do with Jewish identity or Jewish skills and knowledge. So would be curious, and I'm sort of nearing the end of the presentation, we could even have a discussion around if you see yourself reflected in this data. Again, number 3, they want to make sure that teens feel good about themselves, which really ties to our first outcome is Jewish teens have a strong sense of self, that they feel connected and involved in Jewish life. And really 5%, which is interesting, is that teens show interest in rituals and holidays. I think there's probably a variety of reasons why youth professionals, this isn't the primary goal for youth professionals for their teens. I would also be very interested, most of these professionals are millennials, how much this reflects their own self of the way they experience being Jewish. So there's more research and data we want to collect around that. Shifting to parents and why it is even more important in this day and age to focus on parents when you're thinking about teens. This goes back to 2015 as a trend that's continuing. Betsy, you can do this better than I can, but teens are friends with their parents. This is really interesting. It is the first time that we're seeing this. They really have a different relationship than historically they had with their parents. It's just a really important piece that we should be aware of as we sort of interact, not just with our teens, but also with their parents. And then what we really wanted to understand is, what do parents want from Jewish programs? Why are they making the time and effort and energy and resource allocation to make sure that their teens are attending Jewish programs? So you can't see, I'm sorry, the gray is very important and the orange is extremely important. And really just the main thing to know is that makes this all very, very important. And again, it's a sense of connectedness, right? That they're not alone, that their teens really feel that there is a local community that they're connected with, and worldwide, that there is a sense of Jewish peoplehood. They're hoping these programs really help instill that. This is where we get stuck. So they really want that their teens to feel knowledgeable about their Jewish heritage and that they show interest in ritual and holidays. And that's not the goal that youth professionals have for their teens. So this is just an interesting tension point. It could be something that maybe just better communication and understanding, maybe adding in different and new programs. But if you could really sort of understand why parents, what parents really want from an experience, it is only helpful in sort of helping craft it and maybe bridge what the teens actually want. And then, social network, participates in activities that have explicit Jewish content, and that they really want their teens to have a joyful experience that is amongst their favorite activities, which is just something really positive that I like to see. And then the last piece that I just sort of want to go into is that the second to last bullet is that they participate in activities that have explicit Jewish content. I had mentioned before when we talked about the outcomes, and you asked about the difference between education and engagement. Jewish stuff, we literally call it stuff in our surveys because we want them to identify with what they see as Jewish. The Jewish stuff matters. It raises their scores on the outcomes across all 14 outcomes. So the explicit Jewish content, teens also crave that substantive content. And sometimes we shy away from it, but it's a real need. We tried to understand how.
Oh, sorry. Quick question from the group. We know that the survey looked at outcomes related to Jewish content. were there any kind of mental health pieces within these surveys? Because I know you said earlier that a lot of the communities have now moved in that, or all of them now have some component in mental health or mental wellness. So is that part of the survey?
That will be part of the survey. It's actually because of what we've been seeing anecdotally on the ground that we're now adding those kinds of questions into the survey. So we don't have specific data on it now. The Gen Z Now report run through the Jewish Education Project. There were 18,000 respondents. They asked an additional follow-up few questions from about 3,000 of them, and really tried to understand, I think the question was phrased, sort of what do you see as the biggest issues that your friends are facing, which is a very safe way to phrase that question. I apologize, Jewish Education Project, if you're on the phone or chime in. It was something like 7 out of the 9 top responses were things related to mental health and well-being. Body image, anxiety, depression, social media addiction, all of that. So cost matters. That's definitely factoring into a parent's decision-making. And then here's what's interesting is sort of how are parents learning about programs? And again, teens are friends with their parents. Like by far, it is teens who are bringing some of the new opportunities to their parents and getting them excited about it. Social media has been huge. One of the things that we're really trying to tie into is the dedicated website is pretty low. We think it's because we've only recently launched those in the past year. I have every reason to believe this number will move over time, especially because they're pretty sophisticated in tying all of that to social media and ads. Because really, with the exception of the ones that have been launched by the Jewish communities, are not the teen initiatives. There just aren't that many across the country. But when you think about how to get the word out, so I tied this to a little bit. I could have used the Gen Z Now report. This is 2016. I bet if we did the survey again, it would shoot up even more. Teens are overwhelmed. It's just one of the many factors that are influencing their health and wellness. For sure, the debate is always, are we helping? Are we adding more to their overwhelmingness as we sort of want to see teen participants become leaders? Are we adding more to their plate? There's a lot in here that I think maybe we could schedule follow-up conversations around that could be pretty interesting, the stuff that we're talking about. So I mentioned we're all now moving into thinking about what it means to support teens' wellness. For us at the Funder Collaborative, it's really important to think about wellness as sort of like a holistic whole person support for all of that. There's quite a number of people who are working in the space of addiction or sleep disorders, really specific, mental health specifically. We're really trying to take the bigger picture of how can we support an overall wellness and well-being. So we have a few different tabs. The site is live. We're still tweaking it, but there's great resources on there if anybody does want to go to it. What are all of the influences that are impacting our teens? We're very much aware that this is designed for parents and educators. This is not a teen-focused site. And as we think about supporting the educators who are also now facing how do they support a teen's wellness, we created a resource guide of sources and biblical texts that could also help shape a lot of the programmatic responses. And Dina, I'm sorry, you were so helpful in creating this. Would you mind talking just a little bit about what people could find on that sheet?
Sure. Yeah, so I had the honor to be a part of that project along with several of my colleagues. And it's a great resource. You can find everything from what does Judaism say about self-care, to some of the more controversial Jewish texts about how throughout history the community has related to people with an identified mental illness or particular emotional challenge. Interestingly, Judaism has not always been embracing of those differences, and certain ritual opportunities are not always open to people with that background. So we didn't want to shy away from that stuff. We wanted to kind of own it and thought it could be an interesting point of discussion as we're searching for inspiration from our history and wisdom.
Thank you. It's outstanding. I did not write it, so I can say that. Really, some phenomenal educators, really led by Dina, helped put this piece together. It is on this site. I'm also happy to share it afterwards. We hope everybody uses and benefits from it. One of the specific things that we're trying to do as this network of 10 communities, we brought together 12 individuals from all 10 of the communities to be trained in youth mental health first aid. If you aren't aware of it, it's a phenomenal program. It was started in Australia and run through the National Behavioral Council. I think there's a link to it also on our site. It really helps you identify when there is a teen in need and really paths to not necessarily address it yourself, but how to get them connected to resources where they might need it. There's a lot of federal grants that are available to help make the training low cost or free. And there's a network of instructors who are trained across the country who can also teach the course. It's an 8-hour course. Almost every community has led that for their network of educators. So it is absolutely worth exploring. And then in January, I'm going to be bringing together a lot of the professionals who are sort of working across the board in youth mental health space to start better understanding what people are already doing, opportunities for partner, and thinking about what else we might be doing. One thing I want to add here, and again, it's something I've really learned from Betsy, so jump in and say it better than me. When we talk about teens and their well-being, we're also aware we're talking about the young adults who work with them. For the most part, many of the youth professionals are developmentally not so dissimilar from where a teen is. And Betsy, please add color to that. And what we're finding is also the young adults and the practitioners who work with teens are facing really similar issues and are also seeking resources around this area. So as we think about our ecosystem, it certainly extends to those millennials as well. So I ran through a lot really quickly, kind of wanted to make sure I hit on everything. If there's any other questions, let me know.
One of the questions that came through the chat is wondering whether if the Jim Joseph Foundation is looking to add additional cities in a future iteration of this kind of project or initiative.
Yeah, so the Funder Collaborative is sort of complete with the 10 cities that we're in, and what Jim Joseph Foundation is really the foresight that they brought to this is really sort of understanding that this is like an amazing incubation ground, and the way to bring this to so many other communities is by some of the work that we're thinking about now with scaling and replicating what we know is working. So that's certainly the next phase of the work, which will be sort of reaching far, far outside the 10 communities. And I will be in touch with details about that effort.
If you've got additional questions, just make sure to unmute yourself.
Hi, Sarah. This is Eileen Cohen. I have a quick question for you. How does this translate, or how can it translate to the communities that are not in metropolitan areas, that are more in suburban life, that don't necessarily have as many Jewish organizations at their fingertips, and have more of a traditional model of, there are a lot of youth organizations in terms of youth groups, as well as the Hebrew High model, and not necessarily like New York City, where there are ample amounts of opportunities available?
That is such an outstanding question. I'm sort of going back to the 10 cities. It was really important that they were sort of geographically balanced. And some of the issues that you were talking about, we see in Cincinnati for sure. And then even in Denver, Boulder, we kind of consider them one community. Boulder's about 45 minutes away, and there's the JCC, and that was sort of the teen opportunities. What's also interesting is even in the metropolitan city like Atlanta, they shifted their entire focus of the initiative once they realized it was based on an assumption that there sort of were a lot of Jewish opportunities for teens because they were in a big city. And they're actually now trying to seed a whole bunch of new ones. And I'm happy to put you in touch with any of those communities because they're on the ground and they could probably give some more specific feedback. In the traditional model, I mean, you know, it's interesting. I would say that for sure what we found is that there are lots of teens who are even interested in attending some of the more traditional stuff. They just really don't know about it, and nor do their parents. And sort of, there's lots of ways to work with existing organizations that we found by understanding how they keep records of teens and actually even helping empower them to go out. And most of the people who show up on teen lists have maybe come to an event like once. And so really helping increase their capacity to work with their even existing universe can dramatically increase who and how could be involved. So that's one key piece of it. I mean, another is an interesting regional approach that Cincinnati's taken, where often they're bringing in on their co-working days and when they think about what they'd like to see out in the community, they're bringing in folks from Cleveland and other cities around Cincinnati because they don't have a lot of those offerings. And that's actually, in some of the programs, becomes interesting to the teens because they want to meet teens even outside of their small circle. So maybe if there's identifying other local regional communities that you could maybe then connect with, we've definitely seen success around that. But for more details about what's happening on the ground and other ideas, I can follow up with you after.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Sara, it's Betsy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about what hasn't worked.
It's a great question. I would say some of the more things that are sticking points or taking longer than expected is a little bit along the lines of what Dina talked about before, is this culture change of people working together, the shift from my teens to our teens. We have lots of different language around community buy-in and things like that. There is a territorialism that often still exists. So that's one piece of it. Jury's still out a little bit on the community websites that we talked about. But again, it might necessarily be a timing thing. There have been specific programs that just haven't really attracted the attention. I think in San Diego, their initial focus and assumption was that they would use service as a way to attract all sorts of teens who wanted to do something with non-Jewish friends, and then they'd be able to identify Jewish kids and then follow up with them specifically. People were looking more for programs than a platform for that, and so the service piece hasn't really stuck, and that's the only city that has really tried some of that. Dina, is there anything you'd add from what you've seen? Or anybody else who's connected to Thunder Collaborators who might be on the phone?
I might say, I mean, it may be geographically specific, but I mean, a place where we really pivoted. We knew that capacity building was important to us, and it was something we wanted to do on behalf of this community, and it took us a while to sort of build trust and traction in that space, and also figure out what wise partnering really looks like, and what was sort of the value add that we could provide to already existing teen serving entities in the community. There's 83 unlike Atlanta, we have 83 existing teen programs here in Baltimore. Like, the market is saturated. And so we had to really figure out, where it made sense for us to be a direct provider and where it made sense for us to be a resource provider or a capacity builder. And so that's something we made a few mistakes and had to pivot quite a bit at the beginning.
So, and then a follow-up. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, and this isn't necessarily about has or hasn't worked. I will say this is all taking longer than anybody ever thought it would.
Okay. So
and I think giving yourself a long runway matters.
So the other question I had for you was, what's the clergy involvement?
Different in each of the communities. Atlanta actually started with a partnership with their local rabbinic association. I think what we're now going to see, we've started the professional development at the practitioner level. What I think we're now going to see more is working more with supervisors, going up a level or two, supervisors, the clergy. I don't know that we've really done that yet, and I think everybody agrees that we need to.
That makes sense.
Russell, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Could you speak to the governance structure of the different initiatives? So building on, clergy involvement, but how do you build partnerships through the governance structure? And who makes these decisions?
Oh, such a great question. Instead of going one by one, I'll sort of give this just a couple of different models. So some are housed only within a federation. And early on, I would say this is true for all of them, early on had pretty big lay committees that also involved teens. And that was also to identify donors. As they've sort of evolved, the lay committees are sort of less and less. In quite a few cities, it is the federation who is the funding partner, and the operating partner is a different organization. In New York, UJA is the funding partner. The initiative is run out of the Jewish Education Project. In a couple of cities, it's the JCC, which leads to all sorts of learnings. And into the communities, a foundation is a funding partner, and it's operated independently. Sorry, the second part of your question was through governance. How can...
Like building partnerships. So specifically, I'm like building on the clergy, like are there partnerships through the governance structure that include synagogues, JCCs, day schools, etc.?
Yeah, it's different for each community. And I'm happy if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I can talk to you about your local community. Again, like Jim Joseph was very adamant that these should be developed in ways that are specific to the community. But involving all of those different organizations has been pretty important. Yeah, so we can talk more specifically after.
Sarah, we've got about 2 more minutes, but I had one more question. Maybe we can end with this one. So the question is, with your wellness and what is it, MESH focus moving forward, what other partnerships are you engaged with? Do your communities use their own resources? Sorry, MESH is mental, emotional, social health. Do your communities use their own resources, or are you looking to build this out nationally as well?
Yes. Yes to both. So currently, what we're responding to is what we've seen bubble up in a few of the different communities. So we're doing a few things in a coordinated way through the Funder Collaborative. Most of our budget is on bringing together the 10 communities. I fully intend to galvanize, participate in, partner with, however, in any form, any sort of bigger, broader national response. Just a priority of ours. I don't know what that is or going to look like yet. And right now, most of the work is done locally in the wellness space with the initiative's own budgets.
Awesome. Sara, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. I know there is so much more to share and so much more for us to learn, and we're grateful to have you as part of the greater teen professional community, and we hope that we'll be able to keep up with you and work collaboratively, hopefully, in some of these initiatives through the cities as well.
1,000%. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for the work that you guys do.
Bye-bye.
Talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.